So over the time I've been making videos on YouTube, some of my most popular have been with a view to gold making, and looking back on them has made me realise that I've never helped explain the importance of auction house diversification. So today I thought I'd change that. This video is going to be based in WoW Classic, but in truth everything discussed is transferable to retail, as well as any other games that have a feature that is similar to the auction house, so bear that in mind. I'm also planning a similar video to this on market voids, which could help massively in the TBC pre-patch, so if you're interested in that, let me know down below. But for now, let's dive into it. So what is auction house diversification? Auction house diversification is the practice of selling a variety of different products on the auction house as opposed to going heavily into a single market. It's not uncommon for people to find a particular farm or craft that they like and stick to that, and only that, often resulting in very slow sales comparative to the amount of stock which they possess. This is often due to the fact that the demand for an item does not rise simply due to the fact that you now possess more of it from your farming. In fact, the fundamentals of supply and demand suggest the opposite, i.e. if you flood the market with a single overstocked good, it drives the price down whilst the number of people looking to buy remains the same. This is because of a premise called supply and demand. Obviously, the premise is quite simple. Demand does not fluctuate based off of your supply, which is a common misnomer. It's actually simply that the price varies because the demand stays the same while you are increasing the supply. This is where diversification comes in. By branching out into different markets, you not only prevent market saturation, but also appeal to different potential target market. To give you an example from Classic WoW, if we say someone exclusively sells tank consumables for raiding, on a server where there is 5 raiding guilds, each with 2 tanks that raid 1 night a week. That's 10 consumables a week he can sell. Of course this can vary somewhat based on the number of people attempting to pug the raid, or whether guilds are doing farm content or progression content, and all loads of other factors as well besides that. But the demand for the item is going to remain reasonably consistent, only really changing with notable factors that are beyond the control of the person attempting to profit, such as the release of a new raid. The end result in this is that our example person can craft, say, 100 of these consumables to sell in a week, yet he will likely only sell the same number of the item, being the 10 that are required by the server on which he's trying to sell. Now, if our example player were to craft his 10 consumables for tanks, but then diversify instead of crafting an additional 90 into another market, let's just say for example healer consumables, and let's say for the sake of this example that the healer consumable market on his server is identical to the tank market, he's going to get an additional 10 sales of a secondary item, meaning that he could craft these 20 items, the 10 tank consumables and the 10 healer consumables, meaning a total crafting of only 20 items instead of 100, and get twice as many sales. Now of course this is an oversimplification of a complicated concept that is ignoring market variability, competition, and the logistics of sourcing any given product, to name but a few of the problems that someone would face while trying to diversify their markets. But that is the premise of market diversification nevertheless in a nutshell. Now, how can you make that work for you? Well, the premise is simple, but the execution can be difficult. So I'm going to talk you through the key rules I personally try to work to ensure good diversity on my auction house while playing WoW Classic. Rule 1. Research the market. So there are numerous data sources available to WoW players to track what's selling, what sells best, how much a server needs, so that you can try and plan whereabouts you're going to fit into any given market. For WoW Classic for example, Nexus Hub, which I will link in the description, is a fantastic source for information on price and quantity heat maps of any given server for any given product, as well as it gives you the ability to track as and when this product reaches its highs and lows in any given time frame. It also allows you to be able to track the trend of any given item at a given point over a more extended period of time, so that you can get a gist of whether the item is trending upwards or down, with a gain or loss in its demand, or possibly in supply if a player that was previously stocking this market has subsequently quit the game, or if someone else has beaten to the punch and diversified into this market just a little bit before you were able to. This helps you to avoid oversaturated markets, or avoid even worse, a market that is slowly dying that you're going to then try and break your way into only to have the market collapse on you. Now, rule number 2 is don't go too niche too early. Now, this is crucial. A lot of the times, an item can seem like a really good choice to diversify into. Maybe it's got a high sale price, or it's in high demand, or maybe it's just in really low supply on your realm. But oftentimes, there's a reason for this, so you do need to do your research. Sometimes an item can simply be random chance, and therefore it's hard to get your hands on and not all that easy to be able to sell consistently and therefore diversify into its market. And other times it can be because of artificial value. Now, artificial value is something that is also quite a difficult concept to go into, and it is one that I could potentially make a video on if people are interested. But to simplify it, really overly simplify it in truth, it is essentially when an item has been given a market value based off the manipulation of its auction house statistics on these data sources. So, for example, of a very common one that happens is going to be roasted quail. Now, roasted quail is not worth anything. You can buy it from a vendor, it drops from pretty much every high-level humanoid, and it's just a food that is not going to give you any well-fed buff, it's just simply to regen health. And a lot of times you'll see that this is on the auction house for 200 gold. And while if you could buy a vendor item and sell it for a large profit margin, which is possible on WoW Classic, there are plenty of items to which you can go out of your way and get and sell for a large profit on the auction house. That's fantastic, but your roasted quail at 200 gold a pop is simply not going to sell. But that leads us nicely onto rule number 3. So rule 3 is to not spread yourself too thin. So for any of you that are currently watching my 7000 Gold No Mage series, you're probably familiar with what I mean here. The majority of that series is spent watching me micromanage my supply of a few select items that are where I'm looking to make my money for that challenge, restocking them as and when I get low. Now, I am currently in that series looking to diversify slightly further because currently my playtime is slightly higher than it might otherwise be. But having a good grasp on how much time you have to commit to the game, how much other resources, such as say for example your in-game gold, as well as also the difficulty of any select item you're looking to diversify into in terms of its acquisition, is going to be crucial here for not spreading yourself too thin. Let's say for example, one of the markets you're already in is the Elixir of the Mongoose, and you're looking to diversify and you've picked an item that is really hard to get your hands on. So, one time, Raid Night comes about, and Elixir of the Mongoose is up at 300% market value, because a new guild has formed that are trying to go and just clear Nax out in the first time they ever run it. Now, they've cleared out the auction house of all of these consumables, and rather than being well stocked up and able to benefit from this 300% market value in heavy shifting items, you've been out farming other items, diversifying overly, and getting yourself to a point where you haven't been able to keep up your supply of the markets you're already in, and as a result, you're now going to miss out on all of those sales at triple value for that one night only. Now, this is a huge problem. Running out of supply for anyone who's ever worked in retail of any given item is something that is the nightmare of your management, because they're going to be looking at all of those customers leaving empty-handed that are simply profit that has not occurred for you. Now, this does lead nicely back into rule number 1. If you've done your research, you will understand how much of an item you're going to need to have at any given time based on the demands of your server. Obviously, some things are out of your control, like in that example, the new guild forming that you can't possibly know. But this is where your decisions come into it in terms of your gold making. Whether your server, let's say for example, has a very clear need for 10 of an item in a given time span, do you make 10? Or do you make 15 so that you're covered if there is any other things beyond your control that are going to affect the amount of sales? Now, these sorts of decisions are what's left up to you, and that's where there's going to be some diversity in terms of how people choose to use this information. But that's a topic for another video. Those are the 3 rules that I like to follow when I am looking into going to diversify my markets. Now that's going to about wrap it up for my basic overview of market diversification and how you can make it work for you. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider dropping it a like, it does help out a lot. Similarly, at the start of this video, I alluded to other market concepts that may be helpful to know, and I'm already planning on making a couple of these. So my next one that I'm looking at is market voids, and that's something that could prove to be very beneficial during the WoW Classic TBC pre-patch. So if that's something you want to see, let me know down in the comments below. But for now guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Later.